probably thousands of pages. This year we were trying to be environmentally conscious, and we've placed all of these documents on a USB, so it's easy for a particular user to just take them and print the relevant information that they want, rather than having mounds and mounds of paper. Council will hear from delegates, either written submissions or verbal presentations, then following that, then Council will go through the operating budget, usually is what they go through first, and go through the various elements of the operating budget, utilizing the executive summary, and then moving on thereafter, once they've settled on an operating budget and provided their approval of the necessary operating budget items, onto capital budget. And for example, last year, the second day was devoted to the capital budget, and the first day was devoted to operating budget. Of the funds from the net municipal tax levy this year are going, about 42% of it are going to police services, fire, rescue, and ambulance emergency services, which is the bulk of the net expenditures. Another large component of the net municipal levy is going to funding of capital projects. About 17.6% goes into the annual contribution from the operating budget over to the capital budget to complete all of the important capital works and significant capital works that the city does every year. The 7-year plan recommends $845 million in expenditures. Now, the bulk of those expenditures are in roads, sewers, and transportation infrastructure. That represents approximately 70% of the overall 7-year capital plan. The latest calculation that we had in terms of the mandated portion of the budget is somewhere around 78%, which means that about 22% of that then is sort of discretionary costs. And mandated costs include very important services such as police and fire and social services related expenditures, Ontario Works, managing our Huron Lodge home for the aged. So those are sort of some of the mandated costs where council has little flexibility in terms of moving away from those types of expenditures. And so that represents a big, most significant component of our budget. But even the other 22% where there is sort of discretionary ability on the expenses, it funds some very valued services such as parks and recreation and arts and culture, for you, if you will. Crossing guards, for example, is not necessarily mandated; it's discretionary, but a very important service that we provide. So that gives you some indication that the ability to manage the budget is challenging, because there is this element of mandated requirements that are imposed on the municipality that we must meet, which certainly drives our budget a fair bit. For purposes of the 2019 budget, we have put forward a proposal for council to consider in terms of investing some additional about $9.6 million specifically towards sewer and flooding mitigation type matters directly related to sewer master plan. And so again, that is sort of a first step forward, moving forward on trying to work towards that. The sewer surcharge is a funding mechanism to fund all the storm and sanitary or sewer related infrastructure in the city, including the wastewater treatment facilities, pollution control, if you will. And so those type of expenditures for sewers related costs both operating and capital, are not funded from the property tax base. They are funded from the sewer surcharge, which generates approximately $60 million in revenue each year. And really the concept on the sewer surcharge is that it's a user-based funding system where sewer surcharge revenues are collected based on water consumption in terms of water or wastewater that's being returned for treatment through the infrastructure, through the sewers and onto the treatment facilities. We've built in about $1.5 million in each budget year as a contingency amount in the past. And to just put that into perspective, I mean, $1.5 million to our budget of $847 million operating represents 0.17%. So it's a relatively small amount of contingency. I mean, again, just to compare that to a household that earns $50,000 a year, that would be like putting aside $88, if you will, for your contingency. So one could understand that that doesn't represent a significant amount. For 2019, administration, though, is recommending an increase of $4 million to that contingency budget line. And it represents one of the significant items that we have before council. And the reason for that is there is a great deal of uncertainty relative to a number of elements, but one in particular that is the provincial review that's being undertaken right now on grant funding. We'll refer sometimes to a pre-commitment within the capital budget. So a pre-commitment represents a particular capital expenditure that has been approved by council. It's pre-committed, meaning that that project will go forward. And oftentimes with a pre-commitment, funding is accelerated, if you will. It may be funded in a future year, but has been pre-committed as a priority item by council because we need to move forward with that item immediately. And so in very few cases is a pre-commitment ever canceled throughout the budget. Oftentimes council provides direction in the past through the enhanced capital budget plan, oftentimes where they've approved certain capital budget expenditures, and those are classified as placeholder funding, meaning that funding has been set aside in each of those years, and the only opportunity to redirect those funds rests with City Council. So where we have a placeholder that's been approved, we need to seek Council's approval if another more important priority item maybe comes up and we need to redirect those placeholder funds. Each year, Council gets a snapshot of what the 7-year budget looks like. They approve the current year, and there's a series of projects, a whole bunch, which are approved in principle for the future years based on the best information that we have at that point of what the capital expenditure priority should be for each of those years. And so that is basically that is the approved in principle category. And each year, as we then revisit the budget and come forward to council with the next budget, there may be elements of that approved in principle that have been adjusted because some different, more important priorities may have surfaced, and so a particular item may have been moved off, or a particular item could be funded from another source, and so we have additional funding to do something else. Ultimately, the final decision on what, if anything, goes forward rests with City Council. If prior years are any indication, I believe last year we came forward with a 2.6% recommended property tax levy increase for the budget, and Council whittled that down to 0.9% last year. Based on their review of the budget, and so again, this is the starting point, and ultimately through council deliberations, council will provide the final authority on how we move forward.